One of my goals for Recross the Paths was to maintain a weekly release schedule so long as it didn't interfere with other elements of my life, be that family or work. And this week I had a number of high time investment opportunities that came up that I'm grateful I got to do, but it means I didn't have the time I expected to work on a project like this. So I'm digging out an old recording from the archives to share this week. Just a quick conversation I got to have with some great friends in the car between events at CubeCon this last year. So I'm grateful to my friends Bones, Jake, and Joe, and I hope that this is something that you enjoy as well. One more quick thought before we get to the chat. Just wanted to tell you that I greatly appreciate you listening. I just wanted to express that you are valued, and I'm glad that you're here on this journey with me. On to the chat.
Okay, we're pulling out of the Alchemy Sandwich Shop. You all know what that means. It's time for another drive back to the hotel. Okay, so today we're going to talk about giving Jake feedback.
That's right. Jake loves feedback. He loves it so much, he has a notebook dedicated to receiving feedback.
That is true.
I'd like to give him feedback on taking feedback.
Okay.
He's doing a great job and should keep it up.
No, that's actually really good. So, how often do you review your notebook?
How often do I review a notebook? Usually, I take some notes during the draft, and then I will go over the Cube Cobra page with my notes, and if I wrote anything about a specific card, I'll add it to the notes on there so that I can reference them.
And for clarity, this is just like a little notebook you have on hand, and you do this with every draft, or is it just select drafts you're working on?
Not every draft. Typically for Bodleian, I focus on cards that are in playtest status, where I ask for a lot of feedback on those because they're, still not permanent fixtures. But for the draft that Bones is talking about here of Midwinter, my new Desert Snow Cube.
Coming to theaters this December.
Absolutely. Just in time for the holiday season. I wanted to get pretty much everything written down because, it's a newer cube and you want to know how it's going. I expect to make sweeping changes to it based on the experience of playing with people at CubeCon.
So you're saying the feedback had tangible output?
Well, yeah, and I think any new cube you should make sweeping changes with prejudice when cards aren't doing what you want. You've got the most available states of cube still to you there. You haven't fought the disorder yet.
So, Joe, you do a lot of iterative design along the way. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
So how does feedback play into your process? I know it sounds like a lot of what you do is kind of jamming something to see if it works and then either trashing it or fixing it.
Yeah. I think I don't always get the most feedback actually from my players. And sometimes I can just tell that they didn't have a good time trying to make something work, and they won't necessarily want to say that.
Kind of a politeness thing?
Yeah, and I think in my play group, there's a lot of people who are pretty new, and maybe they try to make something work, and it's more complicated to make it function than I realized, and just kind of seemed like a trap to them, even if they wouldn't articulate that. So I guess trying to see if people are really having a blast or not.
Like, do you confront players? Is that like, hey, you look like you're really bummed that Clark Clan Ironworks wasn't supported. Like, how can I help?
No, I don't think I have nearly as concrete or serious of a process or a plan as Jake does.
I want to jump in right there and say I think my process, the notebook, might confer a degree of seriousness to it.
It looks pretty official.
It doesn't have. I really am here for the vibes in most cubes. I care how players feel coming out of a draft. I really don't believe that we ever draft a cube enough to get to some sort of objective truth about it where it's a data-driven, results.
Except for Daniel's data-generated vintage cube.
Well, yeah. We can generate it with data, but, we probably can't tell what the best cards are, with that data. Maybe we can. That'll be a second follow-up episode with Daniel.
Yeah.
When we get Daniel in the car.
When Daniel joins us in the car, we can talk about data generating a cube. But
But that's a good point, that there's not an objective, this is the result that we have to achieve.
Yeah, frankly, even with the MTGO cube, I'm not confident in that data. I think a big piece that we're missing in that data is that not everyone drafting the MTGO cube or the Arena cube or whatever cube we're looking for is trying to do the same thing, right? Ostensibly winning matters to people, but sometimes people are just trying to draft Storm and have a good time. Sometimes people are drafting mono white aggro because they want to, win. But when you hear that mono white aggro has the best win rate, I think part of that baked in is that it's very open because a lot of people are not going to think that that's fun, and they're not going to pay to do that with their time, even if it's optimal from a win rate perspective. So, but the vibes are key. That's really what it comes down to. One of the things I wrote down in my notebook was our good friend Turner saying, "I hate that I have to pass this," when he took a snow land over Bloodbraid Elf, and then he wheeled Bloodbraid Elf, and he didn't hate it anymore. And I thought that was a funny moment, so I wrote it down so that I would remember it. And now it's immortalized on this podcast, too.
So, Joe, you got to draft this cube as well, right?
I did. It was really fun.
It's good feedback.
How did you feel like your draft went?
My draft, I thought, went the worst that a draft has ever gone. I was really, really nervous because I was spread across 3 colors after the first pack, and I don't know what I was doing, but I ended up, I think I was 5 color.
Yeah, I looked at your deck 2 different times, and I thought you were playing different decks.
Yeah. I might not have had any white, but basically I ended up feeling like I was not going to get enough lands, and so I just started vacuuming up every dual land I could get. And then I had so many colors at the end of pack 2, start of pack 3, that I ended up playing some stuff I didn't think I would play. And it ended up being really fun, just kind of trying to hang on long enough to cast Dragon Lord of Tarka or something and make it to the late game. It was really, really fun.
I thought that was a great piece of feedback when we were talking last night, because I think a drafter who says, "Wow, I feel like I train wrecked this harder than I've ever train wrecked before." Yeah. And then, let's not mince words here. Joe was 1 turn away from the finals.
Yeah, seriously.
Coming into it, against a very, very nasty Jund deck that wheeled a Bloodbraid Elf. And so I thought that was really cool that someone
fun.
went from, "I thought this is the worst I've ever drafted a deck," to really viable strategy that paid off.
That's definitely not every player's demeanor, right? Like, hey, I had a bad time, or I had a bad deck, but I had a good time.
And he had a good deck. That was the trick. He just underestimated himself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a brand new format, so you don't always know what's going to work. I think my instinct was that taking big spells that had a huge effect and just trying to somehow cast them would be good, and I think that was true. I think any decks that were going under had a big advantage against me. But
I think there's only one deck going under people, and I do intend to look at how the efficacy of Blizzard Brawl in a cube with lots of snow lands, along with Snakeskin Veil and Take Up the Shield. Whew. Well, it's interesting.
Yeah, I got smoked by that.
Yeah,
so would anyone.
That deck didn't win. It lost to the deck that ultimately went 3-0.
I think when I walked up to the table there, it was it Guardian Spirit Keeper? What's that one called?
Hallowed Spirit Keeper.
Hallowed Spirit Keeper, and I think they produced 9 Spirit tokens.
That is how they won the final game.
So many tokens.
But
I didn't mean to steal the punchline there.
That is how they won the final game, and that was pretty cool. But, yeah, that's true. The interesting thing is that the players with counter spells against that deck hated them. But then when they were countering Dragon Lord of Tarko, they saw it coming, they were like, "This is an awesome spell." And so I think that was, another feedback piece there where people are going to have very different experiences with cards, especially if they draft a secret aggro deck that I didn't really think. But at the same time, we have a cube here where green-white might emerge as a premium color pair based on the cards available to it, and how often can we say that that's the case?
I mean, snow certainly pushes you that direction. You have a lot of, your Saddled Rhymestag is being one of the best aggro creatures.
Saddled Rhymestag also did a lot of beating down in that deck, and was a snow permanent for Blizzard Brawl.
So, Bones, you do a lot with feedback. You receive a lot of feedback, as it were.
I received some feedback today. Today, this will date this recording, I suppose.
Whenever this was.
Yeah, whenever this may have been, was the second time World War of the Spark has ever been drafted, and I wasn't in it. So the first time I wasn't in the pod, and the second time it's ever been drafted ever in paper. And I got some feedback from a player that Elder Spell is the best card in the cube. It's so strong. I don't see how you could possibly lose while you have it. Then later I went back over to the pod, and sure enough, the Elder Spell player was in the finals against another player, and ultimately lost. Whether this, like Hogak in a certain Washington, D.C. cube proves that it didn't 3-0, so it's not broken or not, who knows. But it was feedback I got that was emotionally driven, and I try to justify it. I know I have outliers in there. It's a very swingy cube. Elder Spell and Immortal Sun are both in there, are both really impactful, and are both really important to the story which the cube is trying to tell. So I don't know that I can cut it even if it is the best. Maybe this is just what we have discovered as the ceiling. But it had a strong emotional impact on one player, and that is what I wanted.
Can I say something about that? Because I heard someone come over in the middle of those rounds saying how awesome their deck was, that it was totally cracked, but that they were really afraid of the Elder Spell, and they knew someone had it. And they were saying, I think part of what they were saying is that they didn't think it should maybe be in the cube, but I thought it was pretty cool that they were afraid of this spell, because it's like a scary thing, right? And I don't know, I didn't say anything at the time, but I was like, this is kind of neat. I like that one spell is really cracked, and it's a pretty spooky, scary thing.
Look, when Nikopos invaded Ravnica to try to steal everyone, like, the Elder Spell was scary.
Yeah.
You know, I think Bones has really achieved the narrative in real life. You know, his players feel afraid of the spell just like the Planeswalkers they're casting. And I think that, as Joe points out, is pretty incredible.
I think that's one of those, I've heard our friend Greg say this on different occasions, but like, if you can have an environment where something unique like that is the boogeyman or is the cool interaction, like, man, celebrate that.
Yeah. That also said, no one looked at Bones in the car when he said Elder Spell. When he said Immortal Sun, everyone in the car looked at him.
What?
Well, that's all the time we have.
Well, we can see the hotel, so we all know what that means. Instead of talking about cube design, it's time to go do a midnight LobbyCon. We'll talk to y'all next time. Bye-bye.